Do you like my harp playing today, Derrick?
Oh, the harp is beautiful, Katy.
I thought we could just do this for an hour.
Oh, not enough time.
My arms would get tired though now. I'm a little bit out of harp shape.
Oh, but it's beautiful nonetheless. It soothes the savage beast in me.
What's your instrument of choice, Derrick?
Guitar.
Nice.
And
I'm sure we can do a duo when we have our own podcast.
yes.
Which that day may be here. Where the hell are they okay?
The 1972 Chevy Caprice Classic had vents in the trunk. They called it a mafia car.
You have one of those?
I have one. And not only do I have one, but I've got Matt in it. Hey,
Matt.
Quiet.
We can probably discern what Matt would say. What about Keith?
I don't.
Keith is just writing his 15th book for the year.
That's all he does.
Taking the day off. He's mumbling in the corner while he's typing away.
Yeah, he's writing our blogs today, folks. Somebody crack a whip. That's what we need. So hey, this is Valentine's Day early, folks.
Yeah, we got the run of the house.
Damn Skippy.
Eric and I are free to talk about whatever we want. Apparently, it's not going to be an hour of harp music, although maybe another time.
Yeah. Oh, but
But yeah, I'm super jazzed about this, Derrick. This is gonna be really fun.
This is amazing. We've turned off privilege for at least one day.
Exactly.
We have a woman and a black dude running the Heretic happy hour.
We're here to bring the house down.
That's right. Burn that
and break all the glass ceilings. That's right. But for listeners, we thought Derrick and I, of course, thought, so we kidnapped Matt and Keith, that it would be fun to come together, show a little bit of ourselves to you as the new-ish co-host. We've been around a while now.
Are you talking about flashing, showing ourselves to people?
Oh, it's a podcast. We're not a video podcast.
Well, okay, folks, you can use your imagination.
What are you wearing right now, Derrick?
Khakis.
Y'all, the best part about podcasts is you can be in yoga pants, you can be pajamas, you can be in your parka. It's great.
Yep, I'm wearing yoga pants for the record because I'm a liberated man.
Because it's still 4,000 degrees in Chico, I'm dressed for the 4,000 degree weather. But yeah, so we're here to share our stories, to talk a little bit, and to say all the things we can't say when Matt and Keith are around.
Yeah, we can be free. We's free.
Totally.
We's free, Katy.
We've been talking about developing this podcast, so this is our trial episode.
Yeah, and so either we're gonna nail it or we'll crash and burn.
Yeah, I agree with that. So
let's see. The first thing on the agenda here is it looks like something came over the hotline. So roll that beautiful text footage. Hi, guys. My name is Jessica Carpenter, and I'm a huge fan of the show. One specific area that I've never truly pondered has hit me really freaking hard recently. I've been punched in the gut by a reality I can't believe I'm facing. 7 months ago, just before the holidays, I lost my dad very unexpectedly. Oh, sorry, Jessica.
Yeah.
He was diagnosed with brain cancer. Holy fuck. Sorry. And he died 3 weeks later. My dad was my best friend and a wonderful father. He died a month before I got engaged. He's missed everything. I've lived hell from charismatics who believe my mother, my sisters, and I believed wrong, which thus resulted in his death. Holy God almighty, there's so much to unpack here.
Hey, girl.
Oh, man. Jessica, my heart is going out to you, but there's still more. There's, as they say in the infomercials, but wait, there's more. We've experienced comments from fundamentalists who informed us that this always was to be. My father was predestined by God to die at this horrible time and just before the hell that has been 2020, no less. But also, some who have gone through deconstruction themselves haven't been terribly pleasant either. Their words of comfort are certainly not as harsh, but they cannot offer me hope of a reunion. These past 7 months have been insidious, to say the least. All I want to know are your thoughts on me seeing my dad again. Do you believe that I will get that experience again someday? My thoughts on hell have drastically changed, but admittedly, I've been so confused. I'm so consumed with letting go of the tethering that I had to eternal conscious torment that I didn't even consider the other side of that thought. Ultimately, we can only know for sure that we simply don't know. But I'm interested in what you have to say. Thanks for everything you guys do. It is changing my life. Jessica. God.
Dang. That's a text message.
I'm in tears.
Yeah, there's so much here.
I mean, I'm serious. I'm sitting up here wiping the tears from my eyes. A good thing it's not a video podcast, or you guys will see my mascara running or something like that. This is
That, and I would have to have gotten more dressed.
God damn.
So,
J- Go
yeah,
ahead, Katie.
what you got?
Get-
Well, what you got for Jessica, Derek? I can feel the compassion
Man,
just pouring
Jessica,
through
let
you.
me tell you something. That all energy returns to its source. All matter returns to its
Yeah.
source. So without belaboring the point and really dragging this out, because you've been through too much as it is. But you will see your dad again. You absolutely will see your dad again. And matter of fact, you will see your dad in the glory of God. Listen, there is no eternal conscious torment. There is no hell. There is no devil. There's none of that. All there is God and us. And because we are his children, what parent, even though estranged from their child, would not openly receive their child? I mean, listen, you will see your dad, and not only will the experience be as good as you remember it, but Jessica, I can say this from the bottom of my heart that it will be light years better.
Oh, preach it, Derek. Everything Derek said, like times 1,000. I'm in total agreement. And I want to speak to also to Jessica with just offering self compassion to yourself. So, like Derek, I completely believe you'll see your dad again. I don't know the wins or the hows, but I do believe it. And I've spoken with enough people who've had enough experiences so that I think we even have a lot of anecdotal proof. But also to offer yourself the compassion to be patient with yourself
Yes.
because oh my gosh, this is a lot. Like your dad is diagnosed, he dies, you get engaged, you're in the middle of a deconstruction process. I'm running out of fingers to
And it's
count the number of things
2020.
that's happening. And it's 2020. Exactly. And it's 2020. And so that patience with yourself, the deconstruction process is not swift. And it sounds like, just tell me if this resonates, write back and let us know. But, you're experiencing a lot of cognitive dissonance where the things you were taught are not matching with your experience. And that's a weird place to be. It's a weird place to be. And even people who are going through deconstruction are also in that space, which might be why they haven't been as comforting as they could be. So, yeah, it'll be 2021 one day. It will be.
Yes.
And hopefully this will feel a little easier. And I think your dad is with you now
Yep.
too. There's some essential part of him that's also present with you.
And listen, I want to say something too, Jessica. You've so moved me with your message that if you will send an email to either the Heretic Happy Hour or Heresy After Hours or Heretic Happy Hour podcast group, if you will share with us your email address, I promise you I will send you a copy of my book, Deconstructing Religion. It won't be autographed, but it'll be in your inbox as soon as I get your email address, and that's a promise. I mean,
Oh,
there's God, I just wish I could reach out and hug her right now.
we're sending you virtual COVID safe hugs,
Yeah,
Jessica. And congratulations on your engagement too.
yeah. And you know something, I think that with your deconstruction and everything, and let me say one more thing. God, I gotta say, there's so much to unpack here. But listen, I'm the I'm one of the champions of compassion. But I'm going to tell you something. All these people that have heaped all of this condemnation on you. I want to say something to you, and I hope you receive this in the best possible way. But fuck what they think. Okay, honestly, not fuck them because I'm not that kind of guy. But what they think concerning this. But let's
And and that's born out of some fear, it's born out of conditioning, out of programming, they may be doing the best they can. We hope that they can do better in the future, and you're on your journey.
Yep. Maybe you can help them. Maybe you'll be that shining light that leads them to safe shores. Who knows?
Yeah, that's great. Well, Derek, it's all fallen to hell already, just the 2 of us,
Yeah.
because we forgot to give people the hotline number.
God damn it. That is,
And it wasn't in our notes,
it's,
to be fair. To be fair, it wasn't in our
you know what?
notes.
But let me go ahead and fix that because let's see. We have a hotline. And that hotline is, if you want to get some exercise for your index finger, you can dial 240 343 7379. Once again, 240 343 7379. And maybe we might even use your message.
Derrick, should we get to the heretics of the weeks?
Yeah.
It's the Heretic of the Week.
And the heretics of the week would be Derrick Day and Katy Valentine.
Hi, Derrick.
Hi, Katy.
All right, y'all. We are your heretics of the week. So, like we said before, this is an episode where we can just get to know you a little bit better, tell you a little bit about our stories. And Derrick and I are just going to have some fun, talk about our past, our present, explore the future, what this podcast might look like with just the two of us. No, we're not. We're kidding. Matt and Keith are going to come back.
No, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. Shut up, Matt. Shut up.
And Derrick, let's see. I don't know, how long have we been working together now, Derrick? It's 4 or 5 months.
About 5 months.
Yeah, it's been a blast. And I realize I don't actually know a lot of your story. I've heard bits and pieces. So why don't you kind of tell us your story first? What's the short, long version?
Well, I was born a young black child.
Where?
Actually, I was born in a town called Decatur, Illinois. And that happened to be my dad's hometown. But shortly after that, I think I was 4 years old, July 1967, we left Decatur. My mom and my dad separated, and we went to Detroit, where her parents lived. And so Detroit is where I grew up. I grew up in the city, in the hood, and I was raised by a single mother. I am the poster child of everything that is supposed to fail about Black people in America. And I was raised in a non-religious setting because on both my mom's side and my dad's side, there are only two classes of people, and those being the saints and the sinners. Guess which camp I was in?
And she didn't raise you in the church?
No, I wasn't raised in the church at all.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, as a child, I was a bit of a church gypsy. My mother's or my dad's mom was Baptist. My mom's parents were Church of God. And so we kind of bounced around between those, and we lived right around the corner from a big Catholic church. So we used to go to mass. And then there was a Methodist church around the corner. We used to go to that. And I think I was 15. Yeah, 15. I got in trouble. And my mom reached out to my dad and said, "Hey, you need to do something about this knucklehead." Right. And so she sent me, my brother, and my sister up to spend the summer with my dad. And my dad made the pitch for us to stay with him. And this was a big culture shift because I grew up in Detroit in the hood, and blackety black was all I knew. Right. And so I moved to Burnsville, Minnesota, where
it's all Norwegians.
Oh man, it was culture shock. And I was one of 5 Black kids in Burnsville High School, which had about 2,000
Oh my gosh, you're
students.
like 15, 16?
Yeah.
That's a big change. That's a big change.
It was a huge change, but I had a couple of things going for me. I was a jock, so I played football. And then also while I was there, I learned to play hockey, which that was really cool. But it was while I was in Minnesota that one of my football teammates asked me just out of the blue one day. He said, "Hey, do you want to learn how to ski?" And I'm like, "Hell yeah!" And so went to this thing that they called Sun Summit, and
SON.
That's what it was. I thought it was SUN because we would go skiing on the weekends. Like on Saturdays, we go skiing, and then on Wednesday nights we have this dinner and fellowship with pizza and a slideshow and music that I didn't really identify as Christian. I mean, it took like I was going there like maybe 2 months before I realized that it was SON Summit.
Before you realized you were like in a church youth group?
Yeah. No, it was in a church. It was in the basement of a Presbyterian church of all places.
Yeah.
But these kids, there was no condemnation. There was no threat of hell. There was no "if you die tonight." They just loved on me and loved on me and loved on me. And they say, "Hey, do you want to know where the source of this love is?" And I'm like, "Hell yeah." And they told me about Jesus.
So you had this great first experience
Yeah, it was
with
fantastic.
church. Yeah.
And then after I quote unquote received Christ, I actually went to church at the Presbyterian church where, and oh my God, I said, this is so not like Sun Summit.
It wasn't like your youth experience. Yeah,
No, no.
that helps.
So then shortly after
Little
that,
Frozen
me and
Chosen experience?
what's that?
Little Frozen Chosen experience?
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was
Presbyterians are nice people, but there is some Frozen Chosen.
yeah, I mean, really wonderful people. Really, really wonderful people. But boy, oh boy, I think that was the most boring church that I'd ever gone to. I went to funerals that were more
More
entertaining than
exciting,
that.
well, a good
Yeah.
funeral can get your heart pumping, so yeah.
Oh boy. So anyway, I fell out with my dad, and I went back to Detroit, and so when I got back to Detroit, the first thing all of my friends, they were like, "Man, so I hear you had the Jesus experience."
Word
Yeah.
had gotten back. This is pre-internet. How'd they
Yeah.
know?
No, I mean, it was like, my brother and sister knew. And so they were telling my friends, hey, Derrick, he's not smoking weed anymore. He's not drinking anymore. He's not doing any of that stuff. And so a bunch of my friends, I think it was like 10 of my friends, came to the house one day and they said, "Man, here you got Jesus." I said, "Yeah." And they were like, "Wow. So that means you're going to stop smoking weed?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they said, "You're going to stop drinking?" I'm like, "Yeah." It says, "So what are you going to do about all these girls that like you?" And I was like, "Oh fuck." And that was where I
Not a
lost.
damn
That,
thing.
that was where I got into backsliding, quote unquote.
Okay, right. Started early.
But before that happened, I got baptized at our family's church. By this time, my mom was going to church, and was Greater New Mount Moriah Baptist Church in Detroit, Michigan. And its big claim to fame is that uh, God dang it, now I can't. Benjamin Hooks, who was at the time the executive director of the NAACP, he was our pastor. So it was a kind of a big deal. It was a big
Yeah.
church, and so I got baptized there. And after my baptism, the church mothers, they gave me a new Bible, and I still have this Bible to this very day.
Oh,
It's a white leather bound Bible. Had my name inscribed in it on the cover, and it had some notes written from all the church mothers on the inside. And they gave me this Bible, and they gave me a bookmark with the 10 Commandments on it. And the church mothers were like, "Well, the first thing that you need to do when you get your Bible home, turn to the book of Proverbs, and you need to read those Proverbs, and you need to memorize them, baby. And then these 10 Commandments on this bookmark, this is what you live by. This is your rule. This is your guide. This is what you need to live by." And I was like, wow. I said, okay. So I started reading the Bible. I didn't listen to them. I didn't start at Proverbs. I went all the way back to Genesis, and I started reading. And so Genesis, fine.
Proverbs
Exodus
is
is,
not where I would start someone,
yeah,
personally, but yeah,
yeah.
I see what
Exodus
they were
was,
trying to do, though.
yeah. They were trying to, basically teach me how to live right, how to
Yeah,
how to
yeah.
live holy,
It's I mean,
right?
like, every instruction there is to a young man, right? So, yeah.
Exactly. So I get to Genesis, fine. Exodus, fine. Leviticus, fine. And then by the time I got to Numbers, I was like, wait a second. This is not the same God I was introduced to in
Right.
Minnesota. And so this God is pissed. He's angry, and he's brutal. He's bloodthirsty. And I was like, and so my poor little head exploded. And then by this time, I had to smoke some weed to kind of get over the
You needed
PTSD.
your alcohol, your weed while you
Yeah,
were
and
yeah.
I had to get some whiskey, to kind of wash all of that down. And so that was that. And then I went off and joined the Navy. I was in the Navy for 7 years, and I had
Oh, where you saw the ice wall.
yeah, oh that thing, at the edge of the world, the ice wall, the thing that keeps you from falling off.
Reference back to our conspiracy theories, listeners, just dial back.
So anyway, while I'm in the Navy, I'm doing that thing, and I was kind of nihilistic as a sailor, and I think that I was suicidal, but I didn't have the balls to kill myself. So
Oof.
I would go out and fight every Friday night, and usually, and so once a month I got arrested, right? And then the shore patrol would come from the ship, and they'd pick me up, and one time the shore patrol didn't come, my division officer did, and when he showed up, I said, "Holy fuck!" I said, "I'm really in trouble now." But what he did is he didn't take me back to the boat. He took me to his house. Well, and then, actually, we went to his house. on Friday night, and then Saturday morning he took me to like TJ Maxx and he bought me some new clothes, and basically I hung out with him and his wife and kids at their house in Virginia Beach, and we sat down and we drank cognac and smoked cigars. And he told me, he said, listen, man, he said, this Navy thing has been around for almost 200 years and it'll chew you up and spit you out, unless you get your shit together. And so he basically helped me get my military career on track. And so I did that, and I got discharged honorably after serving two terms. And then I went out and, went to work and all of that. And I met a girl and we dated for a while and we lived together for a while. And then we got married. And then almost 5 years after we got married, she died of cancer. And that was the first time when I really, really knew that God was real. God had to be real, because I really was convinced that if she died, I'd die. I couldn't see life beyond that. And so when it happened, God sent people, he orchestrated circumstances and all of these things. And I really believe that, even as deconstructed as I am now, that God saved my life for a reason.
The presence of God sounds like it was just very real, very palpable for you in that time of grief.
Very. Yep.
Yeah.
And so I think it was almost 2 years prior to that when I got what I call the call to preach. And so from 1992 until about 2000, I just, every time it would come up, I would say, no, 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 no. That's not me. That's not for me. And then one of my friends, one of my Navy buddies invited me to his church, and the preacher was a big black dude. I mean, he was like TD Jakes big, right? Big guy, and he had a jerry curl. I don't know if you know what a jerry curl is,
yeah.
but he had a wet jerry curl where he was soaking everybody on the front pews, right? And he was just sitting up there, and he was hucking and bucking and Jesus, and the word of God, and he
was
was
like in a Pentecostal setting.
Yeah, and he had on a lime green suit with lime green alligator shoes and this wet ass jerry curl. And when I'm looking at him, I looked up because I didn't understand to look in for God. So I'm looking up and I said, God, if this is what you want me to do, you can count me out.
I have another style going on.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. But eventually, I met my current wife, Angela, and at the time that I met her, this is when I had actually kind of gotten into ministry, and I was attending a church, and I was going through a leadership class and all of this stuff. And I remember telling her, I said, you know what? I said, God called me to preach. And we were talking, she was in Texas, I was in Chicago. And when I told her that, there was like about, to me, it felt like about 30 minutes of silence, but she claims it was only like about 2 minutes. But she's the daughter of a pastor and the granddaughter of a pastor and the great granddaughter of a pastor. And so she was like, I don't want any part of that.
Yeah.
So
it's pastor, the kind of tradition. It sounds like you were kind of a Pentecostal tradition at the time.
Yeah, and that's and so anyway, we get married, and then we went through some church hell, and that's something I'll save for another episode. But eventually, we landed up here in Arizona, and we planted a church, and the church was actually very successful. We had a small church family. I think that we at our high water mark was about 60 people. And then pretty much on the average, we run like maybe about 10 or 15 people. That was our average, right? And during this time, I started the deconstruction process because the first thing that I saw was that God is love. God is love. And when I got hold of that, that took me down a rabbit hole, and it caused me to go back and reevaluate, reverse engineer, take apart, put together everything that I had known before then. And so when I wrote my book, Deconstructing Religion, in 2016, at that point, by the time I'd actually finished that book, I was well past where the book is.
Right.
And I was just like, wait a second. Okay. So, and so where I am now, to kind of wrap this up and put a bow on it, because I don't want to talk through the whole show, is that I'm at the point now where I believe, and listen, I have completely shit canned everything that religion has taught me, everything. And I start from the construct that Jesus is God, and that Jesus came to show us that we too are God. And so when I look at scripture, basically the only thing that I count in my personal canon is the first 3 chapters of Genesis, the Gospels, the book of Acts, and that's pretty much it. That's where I am. But I believe in the whole, many paths kind of thing, and that's heresy.
Right.
But I also, for me, I love Jesus. I know Jesus. Jesus is real to me. But it's not this Jesus that we've been taught, that if you don't accept him, if you don't receive him, you're going to hell and all this other stuff, man. It was like that was one of the biggest things, was unraveling the yarn that was the hell story.
And so was that taught to you in that, the youth group experience that you had, or a little bit later?
It was well.
You didn't grow up with it.
Listen, when I went through that youth group, there was never a single mention of the devil or hell or any of that. That was back. I didn't catch that until I got back to Detroit and got in my Baptist church. That's
Yeah. So you kind of got like a really well-rounded Christian experience.
Yeah, I would say so.
In all these different churches.
Yeah, and I've gone from Pentecostal to Word of Faith, to Apostolic. Matter of fact, at one point in my life, I was a consecrated bishop, an affirmed apostle, and an ordained pastor. And at one time, I was the head of the International Circle of Faith, which is one of the largest apostolic organizations in the world. And that's where I met, we have a Heretic of the Week, Dr. Lamont McNeese. That's where we met.
Right.
But so I've served in every capacity, from the ministry of toilet cleaning to being the head of an ecumenical organization. And that's my story.
And so now, I think one of the things I've heard you say, I don't know if you've said it explicitly on the podcast, so we can delete if uncool, but is that you really don't call yourself a Christian now.
No.
I heard that Jesus is really important, and I think some listeners may be like, we are also called to be gods.
Yep.
It's language I'm familiar with. I think I come down on kind of a different side of that theology. But what is it that you don't? Why is it that you don't call yourself a Christian, and what do you call yourself?
Well,
if anything.
where I stopped using the Christian moniker about a year ago, and it was in the wake of a lot of the police violence against Black people.
Oof.
And so at that time I was in what they call the Grace Camp. I went to the leaders of the Grace Camp, some of the heavy hitters, and I said, listen, guys, I need you to stand with me on this. I don't need you to agree 100%, but I need your support and
some solidarity,
and just listen, just say that it's wrong. That's all. You don't have to bang the drum like me. You don't have to shout at people like me. You don't have to march like me. You don't have to boycott anything like me. But just say something. Just say that it's wrong. And they say, oh, no, Derrick, what we're going to do is we're going to pray on it. We're going to all come together. We're going to fast and we're going to pray. And I'm like, no, listen, fasting and praying hasn't helped Black people in 400 years. This is something real. I'm dealing with this. I have to explain to my kids why this keeps happening, because they're asking me, Dad, what's going on here? And so I'm having to try to sort this out. And at that point I said, something, this is what happened. I said, I called myself speaking to God, and I said, God, I can't call myself a Christian anymore. And he said, I never called you to do that.
Right.
And so at that point, I backed away from it. Now I'm going to tell you something. I love Jesus. And I'm going to say something here that some people are going to find completely heretical, but I'm going to say it anyway, because Jesus is the fucking man. Okay.
We're on Heretic Happy Hour. I think everything goes.
Yeah, everything is cool. But the thing is I want people to know that, because see, I love Jesus. And the Jesus that I know loved everyone. He embodied empathy and compassion to all humanity, to everyone who came to him. Everybody who came to him that needed something, they got it. And not only just the people that came to him, but there were people that were just along the way that Jesus dealt with, because Jesus doesn't demand that we come to him. He doesn't demand anything. And what I say to people, they say, well, what did Jesus come to do? And I say, Jesus came to reveal the intersection of divinity and humanity. And I'm not one of these people that puts a lot of emphasis on the cross. But if you want to hang something there besides Jesus, I would say that the cross is the intersection of divinity and humanity, and that's where I am. I really believe that Jesus came to show us that, number one, there was never anything wrong with us. Number two, that there's nothing separating us from the Father. Number three, that the Father loves us, and four, that we are co-equal with Him, and thus co-equal with God. And that's how I can say that I am God. Hey, and there it is. Whoop, there it is.
Awesome. That's it's really fun for me to hear your story. I knew just a few bits and pieces, but not, not the whole. So that's amazing to hear. And I'll be we need to have like a whole we need to have whole another Valentine's Day to talk about like the are we God, are we not, kind of Wayne Dyer
Yeah.
or not.
Yep. I would
And
love
that's
that.
it's actually something I say like pretty explicitly. I'm like, actually, I don't like I'm not God. And
But you
so
know what? The I guess like the common ground between you and I is that now I see things more in a quantum mechanics slash metaphysical sense instead of
yeah, I
a
love all
pure
that.
spiritual sense. And so that's why
Right.
when we met for the first time and then we began to talk, what you were saying was really resonating with me, because basically, that metaphysical part where you are, that's someplace where not only I am, but that's someplace where I'm growing. And so believe it or not, you may find this hard to believe, but I actually I learned so much from you. I remember the talk that you gave in the NAMAD 2020 conference,
Yeah, yeah, that was
and I
fun.
was I was just like, whoa! I'm listening to your message. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa! I'm like, she's speaking my cracker like a language.
Well, I know every time you have a like, on your Facebook lives when you have a quantum something or another, I'm like, there it is. That's fun. Well, yeah, well, it's definitely, I definitely didn't grow up talking about quantum physics or metaphysics or anything like that. So, should I start at the
So
beginning?
tell us about your journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I grew up, it's interesting. I grew up in Louisiana and I grew up to parents who, if they were sure about any one thing, it was that we were not going to be Baptist. They had both grown up Southern Baptist. And by the time, I think a few years after they got married, and I'm the youngest kid by far, they were like, we're not doing that. They recognized some of the toxic stuff. They got out. So I grew up United Methodist, which on the whole was good for me. But I was evangelical adjacent, and all my friends were evangelical, went to a big Southern Baptist church. So I went to a lot of their youth stuff, where a lot of hellfire was preached and a lot of sexual purity stuff was preached. That I think the sexual purity stuff definitely was part of my upbringing, because that doesn't leave you unless you're really
You're
conscientious
gonna
about.
have to tie that back into your book, because I want to hear about your book.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and for girls, I think it affects girls and boys differently. Equally impactful. But girls can inherit a lot of the sort of the body shame around sexuality, and a lot of that purity. Like, who does your purity belong to? So I wasn't like full fledged into it, but it was really present. Really present growing up. Things like virginity were emphasized, sort of purity were emphasized, all of that kind of stuff. And at the same time, I was also going to Catholic school. So I went to Catholic school from preschool through seventh grade. And although I left in seventh grade, it was very formative. So, y'all, you want to throw a theology at me to deconstruct? I have experienced it, from Catholic to mainline Protestant to evangelical Southern Baptist kind of purity culture. Had an experience I went to Southern Baptist camp with my cousins growing up, and had the whole saving moment down at the walk down to the front of the stage. And my poor parents, when I told them about it, I think they were just like, "Oh my God, this is everything we tried to keep her away from. How did this even
I
happen?"
remember when you told us about church camp, and I was like,
Oh yeah,
ooh,
oh
woo.
yeah. Was a yeah, yeah. And so I was inhabiting lots of different worlds growing up. And I think I started deconstructing some of the hellfire stuff, because it wasn't my experience. My experience was that God was good, that I was loved. And some of the closeness that I saw my evangelical friends having with God, I very much envied though. And I didn't have that in quite the same way. I had my own experiences, but there was a lot of priority placed on having a very intense emotional experience that I
Mm.
didn't always have. You can tell from my, my trajectory since then, I'm in my head a lot. And so the thought that God could come to me through actual study, not doctrinal study, but just my own
Mhm.
insights was brand new for me. And so when I go to college, I think second semester of college, I take a new intro to New Testament class. I'm at Centenary College of Louisiana. And they say, my professor, who's now a colleague and friend, told me we're going to study the New Testament. We're going to find out why these people wrote these books the way that they did, who wrote them, when they wrote them. Just because it says the Gospel of Mark doesn't mean that Mark wrote it, and put all those pieces together. And I thought I had died and gone to heaven. This is hellscape for most people. I was so happy. Finally, someone was answering my questions. And so then I was like, I can actually come to God through my head space, through my curiosity, through what I want to know. And so I had some very formative experiences there. So I never got so deep into that evangelical world that it was like crawling to get out of it. But the deconstruction process took years around sexuality, years around purity, years around things like, because it says it in the Bible, how do we translate that into something that's usable today? Just because I know why an ancient person wrote it doesn't mean that I don't wrestle with, is that authoritative or
Now,
not?
one of the things you're really a deep theologian, which is something that I'm not. But I wonder how did this deconstruction impact your relationship with your fellow theologians? People you went to school with and people that you labored with. What was the reaction that people had?
I think that's a great question. In college, like all this is happening in college, and all of us who are kind of journeying through a religion major are doing similar things at similar times. And different people have different, really different reactions to this process. We were all very much Gen X. And so we were really used to not being labeled and resisting those labels. And so there were some people in there who have gone very traditional, very kind of conservative. There are some people in there who, like me, who have gone off into quantum physics and metaphysics and past lives. I'd say not many. I'm probably one of the only ones who have done that. And a lot of people who've stayed in a kind of moderate mainline tradition.
Okay.
Um, so I don't know that we would have called it deconstruction because in college, at this college, I mean, it's a fairly progressive college in the religion department. Our professors were asking us to engage this process. What they weren't good at, sorry, professors, what they weren't good at was providing a safety net for us to experience the full range of like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. What do I do now? They were like, yeah, you're freaking out. Good luck.
Yeah. Yeah, there needs to be a safe landing place.
We need a safe landing place. And so a lot of people, if they're taking those for like their core curriculum, they leave that and they're just torn apart. And there's not a lot of safety net and there's not a place for them to process that. And so I think the one thing I really learned is like when I teach, which is rare now, but when I was teaching those 101 classes, as much as I could, I provided a safety net. I let people express what they were experiencing if they were deconstructing something very deeply. And so that's hopefully a gift I've offered those students.
That's something I really love about you because you're very even though you're very I'm just gonna put it out there. You're one of the smartest people I know. I mean, just really, you're just you're
Oh,
just you're just
that's
fucking smart, right? And you know that you know the
there's a lot
stuff.
of books.
Yeah, so you pull up all of this this deep theological knowledge, and but the one thing is that what I love about you is that you don't have an arrogant bone in your body. It's like you're very tolerant and very empathetic of where people are on their journey. And I'll be honest, I'd like to. I kind of aspire to be more like you.
Oh, I think this admiration is just totally mutual, and I think I have a tendency to hide behind my books sometimes. So, fellow co-hosts who are here and listening, feel free to call me out on that anytime, because the books don't actually tell us what our experience is with Jesus, you know? They offer us one avenue.
Stop squirming.
Right. From there, for me, I decided to go to seminary, and I went to United Methodist Seminary. I got an academic degree, so I did not get the degree that sort of leads you towards becoming a pastor. Very happy in my academic world. After a few years after that, I began my PhD work. Well, the time when I began my PhD work, I was mid-20s, and I thought, "Oh, I think I've had just enough of this church experience." Some of the church services just weren't fulfilling for me. Think maybe I'm post-Christian. I thought maybe that was a label I could have. So I was kind of in the throes of a deconstructing, like, what am I? What am I? Who am I? I know this is important. And I mean, for God's sake, I was going to get a PhD in the New Testament. And so I was in Berkeley, California. I'm fairly extroverted, fairly extroverted. And I thought maybe I'm post-Christian. I'm not gonna do church. I'm not gonna do any of this for a few years. Just, there's too much corruption, hypocrisy, all of that. But I got lonely because I'm pretty extroverted. And so I'd been there about 2 days. I think I got there on a Thursday, Friday. Well, by Sunday, I was just bored out of my mind and lonely. And so I went to the church around the corner. And then the week after that, I joined it.
Oh,
And
wow.
so that's been my denominational home, is this Christian Church Disciples of Christ,
Okay.
since that time. And so it was really on this journey where I began to know and experience, like Derrick did, from the time he was much younger. And so this is where I'm envious of you, Derrick. I really began to experience the God who can hold me and hold all of my difference, who can hold all of who I am and just love that and created that within me. Began having these metaphysical, mystical experiences. So I'm working on PhD during. I'm working on PhD by day, but by night I'm exploring my chakras.
Yeah. Now that's something
And there's no better place to do that than Berkeley,
I
California.
want you to talk a little bit about that, about your study in the chakras and also Reiki. I know that
Yeah,
you're a Reiki practitioner, and
I
so I
am.
want to know. But tell us more about that.
Yeah, and I would say, this was probably part of that deconstruction process because it doesn't come naturally to most, Methodist, Baptist, Catholic kids to explore their chakras. So, in Berkeley, I was, studying, taking classes, all that, and I started going to a dream class, and it was a class only on interpreting our dreams. Very intuitive process. The man who taught it, he died recently, Jeremy Taylor. Just really opened up my eyes and my insights to the fact that dreams are a psychological phenomena that we experience, but they're also more than that. Dreams, we would come to class and people would have like the same, like two people would show up and they had a similar dream or the same symbols would appear in everyone's dream one night.
Wow.
Yeah, it was cool. And I was like, oh, things are not exactly the way I think they are. Like we can't explain everything by the brain,
Right.
or by by psychological analysis. It's helpful. It's not the whole story. So it really, this class was such a lifeline for me. Everyone got an A. I went every Monday night for 2 years. I never missed.
Wow.
I mean, if I missed, I was really sick to miss. From there, I mean, like you, I feel like God really placed some key people in my life. One of them was a Catholic brother, a monk, and he taught transpersonal. He was a transpersonal psychologist, and he taught meditation, and he taught me about meditation and the chakras
Hmm.
and about energy work. And so it kind of all snowballed from there. So fast forward, I finally finished. I'm working towards finishing my PhD. My partner and I moved to Chico, California, where I currently live. And somewhere in the middle of there, I told the person who was my pastor at the time, it was funny. I called her. I was like, "Can we just go on a walk?" She said, "Yeah." And so I called her. We went on a walk. I had been engaging with women in ministry for probably 15 years at this point in time. And she let me get through about an hour of the walk. And she said, "Why are we on this walk?" And I said, "Well, the word ordination keeps on coming through my head. And I don't know what to do with that because I had always been a really dedicated to being a good layperson." So then I began the path towards ordination, which was its own scary, metaphysical, weird adventure. I had to, you have to can deconstruct all that in my tradition not before they certify you, but like that's an important part of the process.
So was the ordination before or after you wrote the book?
It was after.
After.
Let me
Okay.
do my math. It was after. It might have been before it was published.
Okay.
But like it was all happening at the same time. Like because the book is my dissertation, so I'm like writing that dissertation that took
Wow.
forever. Took many years. I'm pursuing ordination because I remember writing to my ordination committee several times, and I would say, I'm really engaged. I want to do this. I think I want to do this. I was never really sure. God's funny like that. I was like, I think I want to do this, but like I have these deadlines and I can't give the time and the soul space that I want to this process. So can we delay it by 3 or 4 months? They were always so gracious. I'm so grateful for this committee. They were like, yeah, we're here to support you, not the other way around. So it was never a test. It was just a companionship the whole way through.
Got it.
And that was very healing for me because I really come from a background of being tested,
Wow.
having to know a bunch of stuff. And they were like, we know you know things. Let's talk about what you're experiencing. And so that was really helpful in my deconstruction process. Everyone needs an ordination committee, whether or not you're getting ordained, to companion you through this process.
Well, that's
We
kind of
need
like defending
deconstruction committees. That's what we need.
it's kind of like defending your dissertation, right?
A little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the ordination
Yeah.
process. Yeah.
Yeah, so, fast forward and, got ordained, completed the book on sexuality and enslavement in First Corinthians, became a Reiki master, began coaching people around the metaphysics, and Christianity, which is what I'm doing now. I had a couple ministry positions in the meantime, and voila, here we are on the Heretic Happy Hour.
Wow. What a journey.
It is such a journey. It's interesting how our journeys intersect a little bit with each other just around metaphysics and around this, experiences and getting out of the head and into the soul.
And this is so funny for me because my wife has always been more spiritually sensitive than I am. And she was way ahead of me on a lot of this stuff. And so I would always, like, when I would see her, doing Reiki, or she's studying chakras, and and studying like natural medicine and things, and I'm like, oh my God, this is the devil, it's the devil, it's the devil. And
You're
I'm
feeling
praying,
for her.
and I'm praying for her. You got to contend for the faith, and now I'm like, wait a second, she was onto something. And then I look back at other people, like one of my friends, she's an author. Her name is Karen Quinones Miller. She's a really famous novelist, and she's one of my Navy buddies. But Karen is a Yoruba priestess,
Ooh.
and back in the days when we were in journalism and all of that, she was into that. And I used to say, oh my God, my sister, she's going to hell, she's going to hell. But now it's like, okay, I get it. And she and I, we could talk freely about spiritual things. And so the whole process of deconstruction for me, like I said, I wrote the book, and I covered these things, like about tithing and about women in ministry, and what people put more faith in Job than they put in Jesus, and I wrote about all these
Right.
things. But what I discovered is that was the tip of the iceberg, and everybody knows that the tip of the iceberg, what was above the water, was not what sank the Titanic. It was what was beneath. And so
Spoken like a true Navy
yeah,
person.
exactly. Yep.
What's your favorite part about the book now? Like, what's something that you wrote about that that may be helpful, to people now? Or I'm sure it's all helpful, but what's one piece that's standing out to you?
The one that still resonates the strongest for me, and I think that this is part of my affinity for you, is about women in ministry, because I really think that women have literally been screwed over when it comes to ministry. I see so many people like Rachel Held Evans, and Mercy
Oh,
Aiken, and Jory Micah, and I have all of these and then you, Katie, that women that understand scripture. They understand the spirit of scripture, but they also understand the mechanics of scripture. And and people women who are natural leaders, that if you leave them to themselves, then they would rise to the highest, I don't know, the highest echelon of understandings, right? And yet this patriarchal society does so much. Even now, it's like, even now, there was a big dust up in the Southern Baptists about Beth Moore recently.
yeah.
and
Right. Yep, there sure was.
and and I'm like, I love Beth Moore. Now, do I agree with her? I mean, she's a Baptist, so fuck no. But the reality is, she's awesome. And so I can't understand why society and the religious apparatus is so hell bent on denying women this awesome honor, because basically what you're doing is silencing more than half of the body of Christ. And I just think
Yeah.
that that's it. So if you go to buy Deconstructing Religion, please focus in on the area on women in ministry and understand where my heart is, because I'm going to tell you something. One of the things that I did as an ecumenical leader was I was very adamant about helping women achieve their destiny in ministry. I mean that was like
Oh, that's amazing.
that was just a big part of what I did, because I thought that, oh my God, I could go through case study after case study in scripture where women led. And and then I meet all of these fantastic ladies who are teaching, and I'm sitting at their feet and I'm learning. I'm having a Martha Mary moment sitting at the feet of Katy. Okay. So I'm learning. I'm learning, and I've grown. I've grown because of you. I've grown because of Rachel. I've grown because of Mercy. I've grown because of Jory. I've grown because of Beth. I've grown because of many women.
Ugh, thank you for writing that chapter. That's amazing. I cannot imagine having been ordained in an evangelical context. By that point, I was not. I mean, Disciples of Christ, actually, we range a lot. I mean, there are evangelical, more fundamentalist Disciples of Christ church, and then there's really, really progressive ones and everything in between. And so, but the tradition that I was really located in was not evangelical. I can't imagine doing this work in a highly evangelical context. Well, obviously on metaphysics and chakras and stuff, not at all. But even that, that's a level of potential toxicity that would be really hard just to navigate your emotional, mental, spiritual health every day.
Well, just know this: that in your journey, you now have a big brother who will defend you to the fullest. I will,
Awesome.
I will, I will smooth whoop somebody's ass if they come at you
That's
sideways.
Fortunately, now I'm just like block, delete. It's fine.
Yep.
Like, we
Yeah,
don't.
that's pretty much where I am. I had to learn that. I used to want to engage everybody, but
Yeah.
there's you just can't. You just can't. And so especially when people go on about issues about race, about sexuality, about male, female, all of this, when they get to that point and they try to bombard me from that area, from that angle, at that point there is no more conversation.
Yeah, I'll converse honestly with anyone. Like a genuine
Yeah.
conversation. As soon as people ask me to be defensive or, they get defensive, I just kind of redirect or block delete.
Yeah. Mostly I don't even engage anymore. Basically, I'm like I know I believe what I believe. I say what I say. I'm done with the pulpit. I'm not standing in any pulpit. I'm not trying to persuade anybody. I'm not trying to win any souls or anything like that. So here's the deal: I'm going to say what I say, and you are free to consume it or ignore it. And if you choose to uh, consume it in a negative way, well, then I'm going to love you, but I'm going to love you from a safe distance, like nuclear power.
Like like nuclear power. And Derek, you know so much about science and military. It's been like really helpful. All these different dimensions of you in the in the podcast.
My wife said I think too much.
I appreciate the thinking.
So the book that you have for You Are Bought with a Price: Sex, Slavery, and Self-Control. So let's just try to tie in those three concepts: sex, slavery, and self-control. I'm really anxious to hear about how you juxtapose, compare, and contrast those things.
Serious. I am too some days. I have to kind of reread it. So this is my dissertation. It got turned into a book. I endeavored everyone to make it readable for everyone. So if this topic interests you, I encourage you to pick it up. It is published by Glossa House. They have a ton of. I know our listeners get really curious because they ask me all the time in our Facebook groups about ancient languages. And so they're actually a great resource to go. Like you can actually learn Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, Latin, all of those ancient languages for yourself. So we're going to have a link for you about that. And they teach intuitive learning, which is amazing and cool. So I really worked with this publisher to get this book out there. And so this is on 1 Corinthians 7, verses 21 through 24, which are some of the most contested verses in the New Testament. It's the only time that Paul addresses directly people who are enslaved. And the reason this passage is so controversial is because verse 21 can be translated one of two ways. Paul definitely says, were you a slave when you were called? Don't worry about it. He says that part's very clear. And then he either says, remain in slavery and use your slavery, or remain in your freedom and use your freedom. And the indirect object is unclear in this passage, and that's why it's translated one way or the other. Well, those are a big difference, right? Like either remain in your slavery, that's pretty horrific.
Mm.
Remain in your freedom is can be empowering. So I argue in my book, the case that I make is that Paul actually recommends freedom for enslaved people so that they could follow all of the sexual rules he's laid out in First Corinthians 7 and elsewhere. Because someone who was enslaved, for instance, didn't have the power to decide who they married. They couldn't even be legally married. They didn't have the power to turn down sexual advances or offers. They couldn't. They couldn't have this kind of sexual, like I'm going to put this in air quotes, purity that Paul recommended for Jesus followers. Because if someone wanted to sexually exploit them, then they could.
Mm.
And an enslaved person like literally couldn't say no to that, or they could say no, it would not go well for them. And so I made the argument that Paul actually wants um, freedom for people who are enslaved so that they could abide by the sexual ethics that he lays out for their community. Maybe for other reasons too, but that's how they all go together. So y'all see how you see the sexual full circle here in my my wonderings growing up, and here it is.
In our notes here, you talk about the using self-control to avoid pornea, and that I believe
Yeah.
is where you get the word pornography.
Yep, they are related. Yeah, so porneia is it's simply sexual. It's like sexual fornication, kind of sexual sin. But here's the kicker: Paul never defines it. He thinks that he's writing to an audience who already knew what he thought it was.
Now, I wonder about this because one of the things that I've studied is that when Paul talked about this porneia, that he was talking about like temple sex. That basically it was the whole Diana worship, and that that there was sex as a part of worship. And
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think Paul. I think it's really safe to say that if that was in existence, Paul would say like, "That's a no.
yeah,
That's a no for Jesus followers,"
yeah,
and really kind of any moderate to
yeah,
conservative Jewish
yeah.
person in the ancient world would have been a no on that.
Don't bring your pagan shit up in here, buddy.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, so definitely any kind of like cultic prostitution, Paul would be
Exactly.
against. But he's
Yeah.
also very much, I mean, in First Corinthians 6, he really calls out the man who has had sex with a prostitute. So we don't think that was in a temple necessarily. It's interesting. He never calls out the prostitute. He only calls out the Jesus follower
Mm.
who's engaging with the prostitute. So I find that very interesting and often very, very overlooked. And so there's something for Paul, there's something like about it's like polluting kind of the body of Christ if someone is engaging in
That brings up a really interesting question. Why is it then that women are always blamed for anything sexual, like the woman caught in the act of adultery in Jesus?
seriously. I do not know. Like I think Paul, it's interesting in First Corinthians 7 because I think Paul is actually, I don't want to say Paul is egalitarian. That's a modern abstract concept. We can't really read that back into Paul, but Paul kind of offers a mutuality for men and women. So in First
Mm.
Corinthians 1 through 5, he says, he tells the Corinthians, hey, you guys are, he's quoting a slogan back to them that it is well for a man not to touch a woman. So it tells us that some Corinthians were taking sexual asceticism to the nth degree, and even though they were married, they were denying sex to their husbands or their wives.
Mhm.
But Paul's like, no, if you're married, you have to provide sex for your husband or wife. Otherwise, they're going to go commit porneia with someone else, like the prostitute or someone else who's married. Like you can't do that. But he actually says like he addresses men and women very mutually in this passage. He doesn't say women, you have to give it up for your husbands. He says, to both, like, be respectful of one another, but don't withhold yourself for the sake of sexual purity. It's okay to have sex while you're married.
Got
And
it.
so why women get blamed for all, I don't know. Who knows, right? So
Yeah, that's one of the things that's always bothered me in my biblical study is that why is it the woman always has the blame? In other words, doesn't the guy have some part to play in this? And when they brought the woman caught in the act of adultery, I wonder who was she having adultery with? And
right.
and when my little flights of fancy, I'm thinking that it had to have been a priest.
It's possible. I haven't done any, like, study on that,
Yeah,
but in my imagination, yeah, there's someone
yeah,
who's a kind of elite leader,
yeah, yeah.
maybe.
Because if it was just an average guy, some fisherman or something, I think that they would have probably, even if they didn't drag him in, I'm sure that he would have been mentioned by name. But there was a reason why that guy was excluded.
Yeah, and and it's I think Paul. I mean, Paul has very strict ideas about sexuality, not all of which I agree with, or not all of which maybe pertain to our modern world today. But in this respect, I think that Paul actually offers us maybe a different model of New Testament relationships between men and women that
Mm,
we can learn from, that maybe we can adapt to our culture today. For instance, like Derek writing a whole chapter in his book about the empowerment of women preaching.
yep.
Like that. Yeah, and so it's not like there's maybe not a direct line to Paul, but we can see maybe the similarities. People are fighting about this in the ancient world, they're fighting about it now,
And the more things change, the more they stay the same.
right? I will say my favorite part about writing the book, my absolute favorite part was I have to talk about circumcision a lot because Paul talked about circumcision a lot and Hebrew people talked about circumcision a lot. And the passage right before mine on enslavement talks about, were you circumcised when you were called? Were you uncircumcised where you were called? Y'all,
Mm.
Paul gets graphic in this section. The English translations do not do it justice, but he basically is like, are you going to stretch your foreskin back out to recircumcise yourself? You know why he said that? Because some people were doing it.
Yeah.
And so in my research, I came across all of these like graphic medieval drawings where people and like all these, I had to read up on ancient medical literature about like radical circumcisions and radical uncircumcisions, which was actually a surgical procedure, and would just flip people out on Facebook and in my household with it. And like watching the cringe was kind of got me through a couple of really difficult chapters of the dissertation.
Well, I have not yet read your book, but I'm going to get it and I'm going to dedicate myself to reading it. Why? Because I love you, Katie.
We will do a book exchange.
Sweet.
Maybe follow up on a Zoom call or something like that.
Yeah. Or maybe we just commandeer the Heretic Happy Hour again.
I'm more than happy to do that. What's so Derek, I'll say my like kind of takeaway from this conversation. Well, there's many, many, many takeaways, but I just loved hearing about your direct experiences of God and how like that it seems like correct me if I'm wrong, like those happen first in your life, and
Yeah.
then all of this other toxic theology comes in, and you have to work through that, and then you return to this direct experience.
Yeah. And you know what? I make a joke about this because there's a term among drug users that's called chasing the dragon,
Yeah.
and where you're going after the feeling of that first high. And so my whole faith experience has been chasing the dragon. I wanted to go back to how I felt that day in Edina, Minnesota, in the Presbyterian church basement, and I want to get that again. Well, now I've gone through this deconstructing process, and I've actually reversed engineered it back to that point. And so I've actually arrived or returned to the point of my first love.
I love that, and that full circle journey, has enabled you to be able to help all these other people,
I certainly try.
and that's so beautiful. So I know it's not always an easy journey and, through a lot of grief that I heard and, on that, but I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad we're here together.
I know. This has been awesome. And I'll tell you, again, I have such great admiration and respect for you. I mean, call me a fanboy, but
This goes both ways.
yeah,
Yeah, it's so wonderful, and I think it feels like we're so both on the same kind of page about this direct
yeah,
experience and quantum reality. I have to work for it. So this is where I'm jealous of you, Derek, because it comes to you naturally, right? I have to really set aside my like all my logic brain to be able to get there. And the but I love it that we're on the same page about that and this kind of quantum reality, and that there's experiences that we can't necessarily quantify, but that we can have through this
yeah.
divine love that we call God.
The awesome thing about tying all of this into quantum mechanics is that what I've learned about quantum mechanics is that the very act of observing a quantum phenomenon influences the quantum phenomenon.
Yeah.
So that means that just the fact that we look at something that we examine something, that we study something, that we unpack something, there is something happening to that which we are studying, reverse engineering, or unpacking. And so this is just really amazing because you can do this multiple times to the same artifact and see something different every time.
There's, like, random stuff that we don't understand, happening at that quantum level that we can't
Yep.
always observe. Like you said, we can't always observe, and, that's where God is present.
That's
where God
right.
is present, and, I know I'm gonna bring this around, like, super full circle, okay? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Because the movie Dune is being remade and coming out in December. Dune talks about this, about what it is to be in the flow of a process, and I know if Matt was here, he would wanna chime in because he loves the science fiction stuff. He'd like Dune Dune and all the books. Like, we're gonna do a whole sci-fi series, and Matt is gonna lead the forefront on this. Y'all, I'm kidding, because Matt hates all this stuff, but Derek and I really like it. We won't inflict this torture on Matt, but we may talk about it,
No, I think we
online.
should inflict the torture on him.
I don't know what Keith is just over there typing. He hasn't read Dune though, but he's seen the old movie. Cool. Well, should I talk about how people can engage with the conversation about quantum physics, Dune, and the rest?
Please do.
All right. So y'all, we got ways to engage. Come to our website, heretichappyhour.com. There's tons to do there. You can click, you can suggest, you can get on our hotline. We also have 2 Facebook groups. Join Heresy After Hours, where we got more than 2,000 heretics just like you. They're asking tough questions with a snarky but supportive community. We also have a Patreon group that's exclusive just for our Patreon members. So if you become a patron, then you get access to that to our Facebook group for our Patreon members. And thank you, House, because my publisher has been so amazing, and they've agreed that they are going to give a PDF to all of our patrons at a certain level and above. So you can actually read all about Pornea yourself. And then you can engage in that conversation in our Facebook groups.
Nice. And for those of you who really enjoy the Heretic Happy Hour podcast, you can be a part of what makes us work. And that is by becoming a patron on Patreon. We have 4 different tiers: $2, $10, $25, and $100. And for the $25 and up crowd, we actually do videos that are off the record. They're private, just for you. Think of it as theological porn. Yeah, for $25 a month, you too can participate in some heretical porn. How about that? So go to patreon.com/heretic happy hour and become a supporter.
I'm still
Don't just
wrapping
be
my
a
mind
fan.
around it.
And if you love this podcast, please continue to listen, like, subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating. Why? Because if you don't give us a 5-star rating, the devil will show up and he'll torment your ass until you give us 5 stars. Not just kidding.
And then you can read Derek's book on how to deconstruct that.
Yeah, that's right. You can deconstruct that devil. Devil. I like saying devil. It's so country.
I like your Southern Baptist Southern way of
Devil.
saying it. Yep.
And so I believe that kind
Hey,
of
that's a wrap.
ties
How'd we
us up.
do? How'd we do on our first solo
You know what?
exploration?
I
Should we
think-
branch off on our own?
You know what? I don't know.
Are we ready?
I really like Keith and Matt. I really
Should we
like
let them out of the trunk and
Yeah, I'm gonna let them out of the trunk, and then I'm gonna go and retire the Chevy. I don't know. I may not retire it because I may need to use it again. And the next time, because I'm an equal opportunity abuser, I'll throw Keith in the trunk the next time.
Oh good, I thought you were about to say me, but keep me out of the trunk.
No.